Okay, let's dive into the story of India's environmental laws. And believe me, it's quite a story. It was born from a shocking tragedy, it was fueled by some really passionate activism, and it's all about this constant, really difficult search for balance.
You know, this quote really gets to the very heart of the issue. The goal isn't to just stop progress in its tracks. No way. It's about reshaping it, Making sure that all this development doesn't come at the cost of the one thing that sustains us all, our environment.
So that leads to the big question, right? Where exactly do we draw that line? This is the core conflict we're going to be exploring. It's this constant push and pull, this tension that has shaped literally the entire legal approach to the environment in India. All right, first things first. Before we can even talk about protecting something, we have to be on the same page about what it is we're trying to protect. So, what is the environment really?
Well, to put it simply, it's everything. I mean, everything. We're not just talking about the big, magnificent animals or the beautiful forests. We're talking about the air we breathe, the water we drink, the soil under our feet. It's the whole shebang, the total sum of all the living stuff and the non-living stuff that affects our lives.
And what's really cool is how the Hindi word for it, Paryavaran, just breaks this down so perfectly. You've got pari, which means surrounding, and avaran, which means cover. So put them together, and it literally means a surrounding cover. Isn't that a beautiful way to think about it? This all-encompassing protective layer that we all live inside?
So, what happens when that surrounding cover gets torn apart? Suddenly, this idea of environmental protection wasn't just some nice philosophical concept anymore. It was about to become a critical, life-or-death necessity. And it all started with a national tragedy. The year was 1984. A single night in the city of Bhopal. A night that would change the course of Indian history forever. A catastrophic event just ripped through the community, and it exposed this massive, deadly gap in the country's laws for environmental safety. What happened was a toxic gas leak at the Union Carbide factory. It was, and still is, one of the world's worst industrial disasters. I mean, a truly horrific wake-up call. It made it painfully clear that the laws they had at the time, they were just paper. They weren't a real shield. And this tragedy became the absolute, undeniable reason that things had to change, radically. And you can see the direct line right here, from disaster to action. The tragedy in December '84 created this urgent, non-negotiable demand for change. And by 1986, just 2 years later, it led directly to the creation of what is now India's most important piece of environmental legislation.
Okay, so what did this new legal shield actually look like? Well, the response was a powerful new piece of legislation, one that was built right on the foundation of the nation's constitution.
The Environment Protection Act of 1986 was a complete game changer. Seriously, it's often called an umbrella act, which is a great way to think about it. Because it gave the central government these broad powers to basically throw a protective shield over the entire environment, covering everything from the air we breathe to the water to the land we live on.
But here's the really crucial part. This responsibility isn't just on the government. Nope, the Constitution basically makes it a two-way street. The state has a duty to protect the environment, for sure. But, and this is a big but, it also makes it a fundamental duty for every single citizen to do their part. It's a shared responsibility, woven right into the fabric of the nation.
All right, so we have the law on paper, but how does this all play out in the real world? When the need for conservation slams right up against the need for development.
Let's take a look at the ChipGo movement back in the 1970s. This was this incredible grassroots effort, and it actually happened before the 1986 Act, but it totally embodied its spirit. And this quote from one of its leaders is key. They weren't saying no to development. They were saying, hey, let's change the direction of development. They were demanding a say in what progress actually meant for them, for the people whose lives depended on those forests.
I mean, think about it. This was such a powerful physical statement. Villagers, especially the women, were literally wrapping their arms around trees to stop them from being cut down. They were showing the world that the environment wasn't just some abstract idea. For them, it was everything. Their food, their fuel, their water. It was their survival. So when they were hugging those trees, they weren't just saving trees. They were saving themselves. Okay, so let's fast forward a few decades. We're going to shift from that rural grassroots movement to something totally different, a massive government-led urban project. We're talking about the construction of the Delhi Metro. And, as you can imagine, this presented a whole new, much more complex challenge.
And this is where we see a really fascinating compromise in action. Instead of just stopping this massive, crucial infrastructure project, the law forced a creative solution. It was this idea called compensatory afforestation. A pretty simple but powerful concept, really. For every single tree that had to be cut down from the metro, a whole bunch of new trees, like more than 3, had to be planted somewhere else. The principle was crystal clear. If development is going to take something from the environment, it has to give back, and then some.
Now, it's important to remember that this whole balancing act isn't just happening in a vacuum inside India. The country's laws, its whole way of thinking about the environment, it's all part of a much larger global conversation.
You had these huge international moments, like the Stockholm Conference back in '72, which was the first big global meeting on the environment, then the Brundtland Report, which really made the idea of sustainable development famous, and then the Rio Earth Summit. These events shaped how the entire world thought about these issues. And that, in turn, really influenced India's own legal approach, reinforcing that core idea that, yeah, economic growth is important, but it has to go hand in hand with a healthy environment.
And that brings us right back to today. So we've seen how the laws were born from tragedy. We've seen the duties that the Constitution puts on both the government and on every single citizen. And we've seen this delicate, ongoing balancing act at play, which leaves us with one final and really crucial question to think about. We know the law provides a shield, but who